All right, let's dive into something that seems pretty straightforward on the surface. How do we actually search an XML file? It sounds simple, right? But it turns out the answer to that question opens up this really interesting divide in how we even think about information. Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it. We all think of XML as this standard. So why on earth isn't searching it standardized too? Why can't we just have one way, just one single method to find what we're looking for, no matter what XML file we're dealing with? Well, the answer is actually kind of simple. It's because we ask XML to wear two completely different hats. On one hand, it's there to structure documents that we as humans are meant to read. But on the other hand, it's also organizing super complex data for machines to crunch through. And you guessed it, two different jobs means you need two totally different toolkits. So let's pop open that first toolbox. We're talking about the text-centric approach. And really, the name says it all. This is for documents that are at their very core just text, stuff that's meant for you and me to read. So the way our source material puts it, this approach is for files that are basically text documents. Think of the XML here as the skeleton or the scaffolding holding it all together. It's the thing that says, hey, this is a paragraph, this part over here is a new section, or this tiny bit is a footnote. And when you look at the examples, it just clicks, right? We're talking assembly manuals, journal articles, the collected works of Shakespeare, newswire feeds. What do they all have in common? The heart of it is text you can read. So if you're trying to find, say, a specific scene in a play or one particular step in a manual, this is the method that's built for exactly that job. Okay, now let's completely switch gears and look at the other side of the coin, the data-centric approach. With this one, the XML is doing something way different. It's not just laying out text, it's a container for really complex and often not even text-based data. And this is where the focus just does a complete 180. We're not talking about readable documents anymore. We're talking about huge collections of data with all these complicated, nested structures. The most important thing is the data itself, not whether you can read it like a story. And this is where our source material gives a really important heads up. It says that a text-centric search engine would just have a terrible time with this kind of data. And why is that? Well, because that engine is looking for things like paragraphs and chapters. But what it needs to find is one specific data point buried inside this massive, complex web of information. It's just the wrong tool. And again, the examples here make it super clear. We're talking about things like proteomic data and bioinformatics, or all the data that's powering the map on your phone's GPS. You're not sitting down to read a map file like a novel, right? No way. You're querying it. You're asking for a very specific thing, like a protein sequence or a precise set of GPS coordinates. All right, so we've looked at both approaches. Now let's do the head-to-head comparison to really hammer home what makes them so different. And just so we're all on the same page, let's pull up the exact text from our source. I mean, look at that. The definitions are right there next to each other. It really all boils down to that one critical difference. Is the document text, or does it just contain data? This little table here just lays it all out perfectly. On the left, with text-centric, the focus is on documents that are text. Over on the right, for data-centric, it's documents that contain complex data. See the difference? And the goal changes too. For text, you want to grab a whole chunk, like scene from a play. But for data, you're trying to pull out one tiny specific value. And of course, the structure has to be different. One is all about paragraphs and sections. The other is about these intricate, nested data elements. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this simple question. Whenever you're dealing with XML retrieval, the very first thing you have to ask yourself is this thing in front of me primarily text, or is it primarily a bucket for data? Because your answer to that question is going to dictate your entire game plan. But okay, let's be real. Why do we even care? Why does this matter in the grand scheme of things? What's the actual real-world consequence of picking the right approach or, more importantly, the wrong one? It matters because, well, it's all about using the right tool for the right job. If you don't, you're just not going to get effective, accurate results. It's like trying to use a hammer on a screw. Sure, you might be able to bash it into the wood, but it's not right, is it? You might not just get a wrong answer. You might get a complete failure, an error, because the system is searching for paragraphs in a file that's filled with map coordinates. It doesn't even know what to do. So let's just leave it with this final thought. Getting this distinction right, well, it's the difference between finding one specific line in a play and plotting the absolute fastest route on a map. They both rely on XML, but the way you get to the answer you need, yeah, that couldn't be more different.